To start with, I would say that this technology we're talking about is MR elastography as a way of imaging a property of tissue that we can't evaluate with other imaging techniques. It's the property that we assess when we touch things. It's the mechanical properties of tissue. And it turns out that that new technology, which is implemented on an MR scanner, seems to have a very important application in diagnosing liver disease. So liver disease is a really important problem on a worldwide basis, and there's an increasing prevalence of conditions that cause liver disease and chronic liver disease and then end-stage liver disease. Those are the chronic hepatitis infections, hepatitis C, hepatitis B, and another problem that is really rising in importance called fatty liver disease.
Yep.
So fatty liver disease on a worldwide basis has been a disease of the prosperous countries. And so in the US now, this condition affects 1 in 3 people in the US. Now, fatty liver disease for most people who have it doesn't really cause any problem, but a small percentage, maybe 20%, will start developing some inflammation in the liver, which then leads to chronic injury, eventually lead to something called fibrosis, which if it progresses far enough becomes scarring, and that's what we call cirrhosis. It's end-stage liver disease, and that has a very high rate of mortality. It's treatable only with a transplant. So this is a very important condition, fatty liver disease, because it's rising in incidence, and so MR elastography is a technology for making this diagnosis hopefully before it progresses to irreversible cirrhosis. And it does this non-invasively, and it does it and it replaces a biopsy in this role. So in the past, before we had this technology or technologies like it, the way that we would detect liver fibrosis would be by taking a sample of liver tissue with a needle. You can't really see liver fibrosis with conventional imaging technologies like computed tomography, magnetic resonance, ordinary magnetic resonance, or ultrasound. And so this technology allows us to make a diagnosis that we previously couldn't with MRI. You asked about the India situation. It's my understanding, of course, we know that in India there is a big problem with the viral hepatitis. So hepatitis C, hepatitis B. Around the world, there are about 200 million people who have chronic hepatitis C infection. Many of those people don't know it, and about 25% of those people are going to develop chronic liver disease. And we now have drugs that are very good at treating it and stopping that condition from occurring. So it's very important to make the diagnosis. Hepatitis B is common in Asia and throughout this part of the world. And then my understanding is from talking to doctors here in India, that fatty liver disease is becoming a big problem here as well. As I say, in the past, the standard way that a diagnosis of liver fibrosis is made is with biopsy. The trouble with biopsy is that you're taking a tiny little thread of liver tissue and you're using that to represent the status of the whole liver. And so if that needle happens to go into a place where the liver, a person who has some fibrosis, where the liver is relatively normal, we might not even make the diagnosis. And if it goes into an area where there might be a little scar, we'll think that the patient has very advanced disease. So it's unreliable in that way. It's also a test that is not very comfortable. It's also very expensive. And in the US, a biopsy costs about 3 times as much as an MRI scan. And in India, my understanding from talking to physicians here is that a biopsy is also more expensive here than an MRI scan. So we know that we need something as an alternative to biopsy in people. But the problem is that fibrosis does not change the anatomy of the liver at all. So the imaging techniques that are traditionally we've used to image the liver simply don't show it. It's not until you have very advanced disease with severe scarring that changes the shape of the liver that we see it. So until recently, with the advent of these elastography techniques, there really hasn't been an alternative. elastography looks at tissue stiffness, and it turns out that fibrosis changes the stiffness of the liver in a very profound way. Normal liver tissue is one of the softest tissues in the body, whereas cirrhotic liver is sometimes as hard as a rock. And so in between, we can detect the presence of fibrosis by looking at the stiffness of the liver. So it was known for many years that one approach, if you wanted to design an imaging technology to assess the mechanical properties of tissue, an engineer could tell you that one way to do that would be to put mechanical waves into the tissue. If we could put mechanical waves into the body, and if we could somehow see them inside the body and see how they move through tissue, it turns out those waves would move more rapidly in stiff materials and more slowly in soft materials. So if we could somehow image those waves, we knew that it would be possible to do that. But the problem is, of course, these waves, these vibrations. This is not sound, by the way. We're talking about something called shear waves. These vibrations or shear waves don't move the tissue very much. In fact, the motion that's associated with them is on the order of a few microns, a few thousandths of a millimeter. It's on the order of the wavelength of light in size, so it's incredibly small motion. My research team, a few years ago worked on this problem, and we found a way using MRI to actually image these waves. MRI is very versatile, and by sort of using a special technique, we found a way to allow us to see the waves with MRI. So the way the technique works is we put mechanical waves into the body, we image those waves with a special MRI sequence, a special MRI technique, and then the MR scanner processes that information to produce the final images that show the mechanical properties of tissue in a cross-section. So one of the first challenges to overcome was simply how to see these very, very tiny waves with MRI.
Yes.
And so that was the discovery that made this possible. That discovery was published in the journal Science.
Okay.
And in fact, the first author in that paper was an individual named Raja Muthapili, who was from Madras and was working in my laboratory at the time. And that was his project that resulted in this technology. We realized even then, when we first made this discovery, that this would be a very good thing for liver disease. We realized even though we could use it in any part of the body and for many different things, we knew that it would be really important if we could apply this to diagnosing liver disease. But there was a big challenge. Getting these mechanical waves reliably into the liver turned out to be a very difficult thing. And it actually took our lab about 10 years of research and development and engineering to eventually develop a way to get these mechanical waves into the body. So that was probably the biggest challenge. Another big challenge was that the mathematics to process these wave images to calculate the stiffness really did not exist. We had to actually invent ways to analyze these images to produce the final result.
Okay, so it has taken almost 10 years to come to completely crystallize this technology for you.
Right. So we realized. So we eventually worked out how to do it. We then, at the Mayo Clinic, of course, we have our patients at the Mayo Clinic, and the reason we're doing this kind of research is to improve the care for our patients. So we actually implemented this at Mayo Clinic, and we were using it in our practice. And in about 2007, we realized this was a really important technology, and we realized that we would like to get it out to the rest of the world, that many patients around the world could benefit from this. So we began to work with GE, who then developed a commercial product based on this engineering, and now it's available much more widely to patients everywhere. Right now, the technology, I think, is being recognized as being a unique tool. That it's also, I should also mention that it's extremely rapid. To acquire the information, the data, only takes about 15 seconds.
Oh.
So we can so this is an add-on to a standard MRI scanner developed by GE, and so you can install it on most MRI scanners, and it can be used as part of a conventional MRI examination of the liver. And because it only takes less than a minute of acquisition time, it's very inexpensive to incorporate it into the examination, so you can use it, and so very widely and very easily. You asked about, so it's just been introduced in many parts of the world, and it's now rapidly being adopted, and we're very gratified to see how people are starting to learn how to use it and so on. I'm now forgotten the first part of your question. You asked about.
So it's about how encouraging results have been
Yes.
across geographies.
Yes. So the original work to see whether or not, because whenever we have a new technology like this, we do need to test it. We need to find out if it shows promise. So at the Mayo Clinic, by 2007, our experts in liver disease realized that this was really giving reliable information. And at that point, we actually put it into our practice and started using it with our patients because we were confident in it. Since that time, multiple studies have been done around the world by many different groups, many independent of us, that have all found that this technology has very high accuracy for making the diagnosis of liver fibrosis. It's also been found that this technique, of all the techniques that could be used, and I do need to mention to you that there are some other quantitative elastography techniques based on ultrasound that have been developed since that same time. But what we know is that, and it's generally agreed in the community, that MR elastography, because it looks at such a large volume of the liver, it seems to have the highest accuracy of any of these technologies for making this diagnosis, especially if you want to detect it early.
Sure. Right. Which other countries have adopted this technology, sir?
So the most scanners now, the most installations now are in the U.S. And so most major medical centers now in the U.S. have MR elastography. Some countries in Asia were early adopters, so South Korea, Japan. There are some systems in China. But I think that it's very clear that the interest is very, very high in Asia, and that's probably because there is so much liver disease here.
What is the next step of innovation you see over and above MR elastography?
So this is just the beginning. This technology is the basis for a lot of new applications. So even the liver application in the future will become even more accurate and more reliable and be able to do more things. But what I'm excited about is that we're finding other applications in other parts of the body. So for instance, we know that we are starting to see some results that suggest that we might use this for diagnosing breast cancer, because breast cancers tend to be very, very hard, very stiff compared with tissues that aren't cancerous. And there are other applications, the pancreas, the kidneys, and so on. But actually, the next main application is actually going to be evaluating the brain with MR elastography. And it turns out that we can reliably assess the stiffness of brain tumors. And that's very important to surgeons who are going to be taking those brain tumors out. If they're very, very hard, it can make them very difficult and take a long time to take them out. Whereas if they're very soft, they can often be removed very quickly. So the brain application is probably going to be the next one that will be a commercial product, will be available around the world. We have collaborators that are researchers around the world that are exploring this right now. And so all of these techniques need several years of research and clinical experience before they can really become products that are offered widely.